Okay, so in this video we're going to have a look at the quadratic formula and how to use it. Now we're going to have a look at mostly calculator questions with a few different types of examples, and in the final few we're going to have a look at some non-calculator examples and how we might actually approach those if we didn't have a calculator. So grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, make some notes, and we're going to kickstart with this question. Now what we're not going to actually have a look at in this video is having a look at how the quadratic formula is created. I'm going to briefly talk about where it comes from, but if you want to have a look at how it's created, I'll link that video in the description for you, and it's a nice quick little video if you just want to see how we actually get or form that quadratic formula. Now for any quadratic, we're looking at the quadratic when it is in this form: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we're having a look at these numbers here that are in front of the x squared, which in this case is what we call a, in front of the x, which we call b, and the number at the end, which we call c. Now what happens is, when this piece here is rearranged, it forms the quadratic formula. And as I said, if you want to see how it turns into the quadratic formula, I'll link that video at the top of the description so you can have a look. But when we rearrange this, okay, and there's quite a lot of steps in order to do that, we get this formula. Okay, and it's x equals, okay, and on the top of this fraction that we're going to have here, we get minus b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now that there is the quadratic formula, and it allows us to solve a quadratic without actually having to factorise it, okay? Because the times that we would use this is when quadratics cannot factorise, okay? We could use it for quadratics to factorise, but it's a bit of a longer process if you are able to factorise it. So again, if you want to see how this is actually created, I'll link that in the description, but for the purpose of this video we're going to be using this formula, so make sure you have that one written down over there. X equals minus b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And for the purposes of the GCSE exam, you do actually have to remember this formula, so it's worth writing it down and writing it down a few times until you're able to remember it. Although the best way to remember this is just to practice some questions. So for this one here, all we need to do is we need to identify what the values of a, b and c are, because you can see in the formula we've got a's, b's and c's. Now that's easy enough, all we have to do is have a look at our quadratic. But one thing that's really worth noting here is that the quadratic has to equal 0. That's absolutely key for a quadratic, because what actually a quadratic relates to is a quadratic graph. And if I was just to draw a basic little sketch of a quadratic graph, it would look something like this. And what we are finding is these 2 points here where it crosses over the x-axis, okay? And in terms of a little logical reason here, when it equals 0 is when y equals 0. And when y equals 0, that's anywhere along the x-axis, and I almost refer to it as being ground level. Now if it wasn't equal to 0, let's imagine it was equal to 5 or something else. If it was equal to 5, what we'd actually be finding is the points here where it crosses through when y is 5, and that would obviously give us two very different solutions. It would give us this one here and it would give us this one here, and we're looking at where it crosses the x-axis for those solutions, or sometimes called roots as well when we refer to the graph. So that's very key. They all have to equal 0. For the purpose of this video they are already going to equal 0, but just thinking about the future of this topic, the quadratic has to equal 0 in order for us to solve it. So let's have a look at actually solving this question then, and we'll pick out our values of a, b and c, and let's have a look. So for this quadratic that we have here, x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0, the number in front of x squared obviously isn't written, and that means that a is equal to 1, it's a 1x squared. The number in front of x there is positive 5, so I'll just write b equals 5, and the number at the end is the 3, so c equals 3. Now from there, all I have to do is put it into the quadratic formula. So forgetting about the x equals for a second, let's just put all the numbers in place of the formula and see what we get. So b is 5, so we have minus 5 on the top as it's minus b, plus and minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4ac. Now whenever I'm squaring something in my calculator, I always put it in a bracket. So let's put 5 in the brackets squared. I'll talk about that later on a later question. Take away, and then we have 4 times 1 times 3. And that's all over 2a, which is 2 1s, so 2. I'm going to put 2 times 1 though, just to emphasise the fact that I've substituted that 1 in place. Now there we go, we've put it into the formula. Let's get rid of this formula now. and we just need to actually get our solutions. Now one thing you'll notice is obviously we have this plus and minus, and that's because the square root of a number always has two solutions. Just thinking about the square root of 25, for example, the answer, which most people will say is 5, but it can also be minus 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is also 25. So just by that very nature, we'll always have two solutions under the square root, unless of course underneath the square root is 0, in which case the answer will just be 0. But let's have a look then. So in order to do this, I need to do it once with the plus sign. So I'm just going to do this whole formula once and use a plus sign, and I'm going to go back into my calculator and change it for a minus. Okay, so typing this into a calculator then. So I'm going to take the minus 5 and I'm going to use the negative button, obviously, rather than the take away to emphasize it's a negative. So negative 5 plus, and then I'm going to do the square root in brackets, 5 close brackets squared, take away 4 times 1 times 3, and on the bottom of the fraction, 2 times 1, which is 2. So I'll just put 2, press equals, and we get an answer. Now just to emphasize that that's the positive one, just by my working out here, I'm just going to put a plus sign so I know that's the one I've done, and that is equal to negative, and we have 0.6972243623. There we go. And obviously in the question here it wants our answer to 3 significant figures, so I'm going to chop that after the third significant figure, so 697, chop it there, and we get an answer here of negative 0.697 to 3 significant figures. Now I'm going to do the negative one now, so without changing anything I'm going to write this down here, and I'm going to go into my calculator, onto the top line, I'm going to delete the plus sign, put in a takeaway, and press equals again, and that gives me a value of negative 4.302775638. There we go. And again we want that to 3 significant figures, so 430, chop it after the 0, and we get an answer there of negative 4.30, and again that 0 has a 2 after it, so that's not going to round up, but we are going to emphasize our answer there with the additional 0. So there we go, there's our two solutions, negative 0.697 and negative 4.30, and they are our two solutions there where this quadratic would cross through the x-axis. Okay, but in terms of this, they are our solutions to this quadratic equation. Right, there we go, that's how we're going to use it then. So obviously you need to know the formula. You need to first write down your value of a, b and c. Plug that all into your calculator nice and carefully using the negative button for any negative numbers, and then the takeaway for obviously this takeaway in the middle there. But we'll have a look at one more question and practice this before you have a go. So let's have a look at that one now. Okay, so for our next question we have a very small change in the quadratic. Notably, if you've noticed this first line here, it says 3x squared plus 2x minus 13 equals 0. So we have a negative 13 here for our c value. So we just need to be very careful when we plug this in, although it's not going to make too much of a difference with a negative c value. It's really when we have a negative b value that we have to be careful putting it into the formula. But let's have a look. So writing down our values of a, b and c. A, we have the 3 in front of x squared, so a is 3. B, we've got the positive 2, so b is 2. And as we've mentioned, c this time is going to be negative 13. So we just need to be a little bit careful when we type this in. So again, thinking about our formula, we have minus b on the top, so minus 2, plus and minus the square root of b squared, and again I'm going to put b in a bracket, so 2 squared, take away, and then we have 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 13. There we go, I'll need to extend my square root a little bit there. And that's all over 2a. Again, a is 3, so 2 times 3 on the bottom. And again, when we're typing that in, we can just put 6 on the bottom. So let's again start with our positive value. So for our positive value, and let's type this in, I'm going to press my fraction button, use my negative button as well, so negative 2 plus the square root, and then in brackets 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times, and again I'm going to use the negative button here, negative 13, and that's all over 6. Press equals, and you should get the answer here, 1.77485173. And then again, we want this to 3 significant figures, so 177, chop it after the 7, and again it's a 4 after the line, so not enough to round it up there. So the answer is going to be 1.77, again to 3 significant figures. Okay, so onto our negative value. Let's go back into the calculator, delete the plus, put a takeaway in there, and press equals again. And here we go, we've got our second value here. So for our negative value, we're going to get 2.44. So I haven't put the negative sign in there, it's actually negative 2.44. So we get negative 2.44151 and then 844. There we go. And again, 3 significant figures, so 244, and again the 1 is not enough to round it up there. So our final answer is negative 2.44. And there we go. There's our 2 final answers, 1.77 and negative 2.44. Now again, you're going to have a go now. One thing you are going to need is obviously your calculator, which I hope you have already been using. And obviously I would suggest that if you don't already, it'd be definitely worth getting yourself a Casio calculator. I've linked a few calculators in the description below if you want to check some of those out. It's definitely worth having one. You get this sort of dual level ability to be able to do this. If you don't have one of those calculators though, you're going to have to type the entire top line into a bracket potentially if you're using a single line calculator, and then pressing divide by and then whatever's on the bottom. That is only going to be necessary though if you only have a single line calculator. Obviously if you're thinking about doing your GCSE exam relatively soon, it's definitely worth getting one of these Casios, particularly for the higher paper. I think it's pretty much essential. It just gives you that little bit of an advantage when you're doing things like this. But there we go, that's in the description, so you can check that out if you don't already have a Casio calculator. And here we go, we're going to have a go at a couple of questions. Okay, so here's your 2 questions, so pause the video there, have a go at getting the answers for both of these, and we'll go over the answers in a sec. Okay, so for the first one then, so we have A equals 2, we have B equals 13, and we have C equals 7. And putting that into the formula, we get minus 13 plus and minus the square root of 13 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7. And that's all over 2a, that's all over 4. And let's type this in. So negative 13 plus the square root of 13 squared, take away 4 times 2 times 7, and that's all over 4. Press equals, and we get our first answer here, which is, and this is for our positive value, negative 0.5924635468, always long decimals there. And for our negative one, we'll round that in a sec. For our negative one there, change that plus for a minus. There we go, and we get our second answer, which is negative 5.9075364553. And again, then let's round these. So for the first one, we'll chop that after the 2. So that becomes negative 0.592. And for the last one there, chop it after the 0. The 7 is going to round that up. So minus 5.91. And there we go, we have our 2 answers. There we go. So there's our first one. Let's have a look at our next one here where we have a negative C value. So A is, this time is 5. B, we don't have a number in front of X, so B equals 1. And C equals negative 11. And again, let's plug that into our formula. So we have minus B, so minus 1, plus and minus the square root of 1 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 5, times C, which is the negative 11. And let's put that all over 2A, which is 2 times 5, 10. And let's plug that into our formula. So negative 1 plus the square root, and again I'm going to put 1 squared in brackets even though 1 squared is 1, take away 4 times 5 times minus 11, and that's all over 10. Pressing equals, and we get our first answer for our positive version, or our plus version there where we're using the plus sign, 1.3866068875. And let's do our negative one. So for our negative here, let's type that in. Let's go back in and change that plus for a minus. And we get a value here of negative 1.5866 1.06875. Okay, and let's round both of these. So 138, the 6 is going to round that up. So that's going to be 1.39. And for the second one here, 158, and again that 6 is going to round that up. So that's going to be negative 1.59. And there we go, there's our two solutions, and there's our two questions completed. Now obviously, both of those there, we have not yet had a negative b value. So what we're going to have a look at now is one question with a negative b value, and then we're going to have a look at some non-calculator versions. So let's have a look at those now. Okay, so in this one here, hopefully you can already see from the first line that we're going to have a negative b value. Now we're not really going to do anything much different here, we just need to be careful with that b value. We're going to have a look at how it changes slightly here. So for our value of a, we get 3. For our value of b, this time we have negative 11. And again, we've got a negative c value, c equals negative 13. Now when we put this value in, as we have negative b on the start of our quadratic formula, that's going to change our negative 11 to positive 11. So on the top, we're going to have positive 11 this time, as that double negative there is making it into a positive 11. We then still have the plus and minus, and then we're still going to put our b value into a bracket. Now this is really important where this really makes a difference, because if you don't put this negative 11 into a bracket, what your calculator will do is it will do a negative 11 squared, but not properly do a negative 11 squared. It will square the 11 and then put the negative sign with it. You can test that out on your calculator. If you just type in negative 11 squared, you'll get the answer negative 121. But we already know that negative 11 multiplied by negative 11 makes positive 121. So you need to be very careful with that, and do make sure that you put that into the calculator. I'm going to start typing this in as we go. So plus the square root, brackets, negative 11, close brackets squared, and then we're going to take away 4 times 3 times negative 13 on the top. So let's type that in, take away 4 times 3 times the negative button with the 13. On the bottom, all over 2a, so all over 2 times 3, which is 6. And let's type that in, and with the plus sign this time, we get 4.607219496. And again, we'll round that to 3 significant figures in a sec. Let's go back in and get our negative version. So change that for a minus, there we go. Press equals again, and we get negative 0.94055289295. There we go. So again, rounding these to 3 significant figures, chop after the 0 there, and we get 4.61 for our first one, and then for the next one here, that's 940, so chop that after the 0, and we get negative 0.941. And there we go, there's our two solutions. So as you can see, the whole process is the same. You just need to be careful when you have a negative b value. Our first value here becomes positive, and also it's essential that this goes into a bracket. Thinking about it technically, you could just put positive 11 squared in that part, as it doesn't really matter whether we're squaring a positive or a negative version of the number, we still get the same answer. So you could bypass this bracket by just putting 11 squared, but I think it's best just to show that you actually know which number you're actually substituting in, and getting used to that process of putting negative numbers in brackets in your calculator. But there we go, there's our two answers. Same process, just obviously being careful with the negative b value. And let's have a look at a question for you to have a go at. Okay, so here's your question to have a go at. So pause the video there, have a go at this one, and we'll go over the answer in a sec. Okay, so looking at this then, our a value is 5, so a equals 5, b equals negative 6, and c equals negative 3. So if we plug this into our formula, again the b turns into positive this time, so we have 6 plus and minus, and then we'll get our square root sorted. So we have negative 6 in brackets squared, take away 4 times 5 times the negative 3, and that's all over 2a, so all over 2 lots of 5, which is 10. Right, there we go. So we get our positive value, and in a sec we'll get our negative one. So there we go, let's put this in. So for our positive value, let's put it in. So 6 plus square root of, in brackets, negative 6 squared, take away 4 times 5 times negative 3, and on the bottom we have 10. So our value there comes out as 1.579795897. And let's go back into the calculator, change the plus for a minus, and we get an answer here of negative 0.379 and then 795 and then 8971. There we go. And again, we're going to round these to 3 significant figures again. So 157, and then we've got a 9 after that, so that's going to be 158, so 1.58. And for the one below, 379, and that 7's going to round the 9 up. This is always an interesting one because we get minus 0.3, and that 9 rounds the 7 up, so it's going to be 8. And then to make sure we get our third significant figure in, we'll emphasise the 0 at the end there, so it's minus 0.380. Right, there we go. So there are our two solutions, 1.58 and negative 0.380. Again, not forgetting to emphasise that third significant figure even if it is a 0. But there we go. There is our quadratic formula, obviously looking with a negative b value as well. And there's our two solutions. Hopefully you're okay with those. Now we're going to have a look at some quadratic formula, not using a calculator. And hopefully you'll see that's not actually too tricky or too far from what we've been doing just here. So let's have a look at that one now. Okay, so for this question here, it says solve x squared plus 2x minus 7 equals 0 and give your answer in the form a plus and minus b root c. Now, as you can see, it doesn't specifically say, obviously, it's non-calculator, but this is a non-calculator style of question. So we're going to be doing this without a calculator. Now, the little hint here is that it gives us the answer, it wants the answer in what we call surd form. So obviously what I'll do is I'll link some videos in the description because you're going to need to be good at simplifying surds for this one. So it's only the part 1 in the surd series, but again, I'll link that in the description. But you're going to see at some point we're going to have to simplify a surd. And the little hint there is we have b root c, okay? And that's a simplified surd format. So we're going to have a look and see how we approach this. But for the majority of this, we're just going to take exactly the same approach. So we get our a, b and c value. So a is 1, b is the 2, and c is going to be negative 7. And again, we're going to put that into the quadratic formula. So we have minus b, so minus 2, and we have plus and minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7. That's all over 2a, and 2 lots of 1 is just 2. So that's what that's going to look like. Now what we need to do, obviously we don't have a calculator, so we're going to take this bit under the square root and we're going to simplify all of that. And let's just think about what that simplifies down to. So if I write this to the side, we'll get rid of it in a sec, but we've got 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 7. So for starters, 2 squared, that's 4, so we have 4. And we're going to take away 4 times 1 times negative 7. Well, 4 times 1 is 4, times that by negative 7 is negative 28. So we have 4 take away negative 28. And there we go, we've got that double negative there. So 4 take away negative 28 becomes 4 plus 28. So that's going to become 32. So underneath that square root, we are going to have 32. So let's write this out with a 32 then. So we have minus 2 plus and minus the square root of 32 all over 2. There we go. Let's get rid of some of that working out to the right there so we can start having a look at getting this into our final form. Now there we go. And we have got an answer there. We've got minus 2 plus and minus root 32 over 2. And we have actually got our two solutions there. We've got negative 2 add root 32 all over 2. And we have minus 2 take away root 32 all over 2. But again, it wants our answer in this form here where we have a plus and minus b root c, so no fraction involved. Now at the moment we can't divide everything by 2. Well, we've got the 2 on the top, the negative 2, that divides by 2, but at the moment we can't divide this root by 2. Okay, there's no number in front of the surd. So if we can simplify this, hopefully, and it will, but hopefully that number in front of the root 32 will divide by 2 and we'll just be able to simplify it all down. So let's have a look, root 32, and this is where your simplifying surds comes in. Root 32 can be written in a different way. So again, thinking about surds and checking out the description if you're not okay with this bit, we're thinking about the two surds that multiply to make 32, where one of them is a square number. Now 4 is an option, but we want the biggest one, and that's 16. So it's root 16 multiplied by root 2. Root 16 is 4, so it becomes 4 root 2. So we can rewrite this root 32 as 4 root 2. And if we do that, we have minus 2 plus and minus 4 root 2 all over 2. And now you can see the 2 here, the negative 2 divides by 2, and also the 4 divides by 2. The root itself won't divide down, obviously numbers divide numbers, and only surds divide other surds, but we can actually simplify this down now. So all we need to do is divide both of those by 2, and we'll have our final answer there. And let's do that. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and then we've got plus and minus. The 4 divided by 2 is 2, and then the root 2. So we have negative 1 plus and minus 2 root 2. So in terms of our format up there, A is negative 1, B is the 2, and C is also 2. And there we go, there is our final answer. Negative 1 plus and minus 2 root 2. Right, so that's how we do this without a calculator. The whole process there is obviously looking at simplifying what's underneath the square root, and for some of these questions, and I believe the next one that we're going to have a look at, you're going to have to also think about simplifying the surd so that we can divide it down by whatever number's on the bottom if we want it in this format. Of course, it might have asked for the format A plus and minus B root C over D or something like that, or just A plus and minus root B all over C, something like that, where it might have just wanted it in a fraction if it didn't divide down, but this is obviously just taking it that extra step and involving a little bit of simplifying surds as well. So let's have a look at our final question for you to have a go at. Okay, so here's your final question, obviously without a calculator, similar format to what we were looking at last time, so have a go, pause the video there and see how far you can get. Okay, so for this one then, so our value of A is 1, our value of B is 6, and our value of C is negative 11. And if we plug all of that in, let's see what we get. So we have minus 6 plus and minus the square root of, and then we have 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 11. And that's all over 2a, which is 2. Now if we just have a look at what's underneath the square root then, we'll have a look at simplifying that down. And underneath the square root, we're going to have 6 squared, which is 36, take away 4 times 1 times negative 11, which is negative 44. So 36 take away negative 44 is 36 plus 44, and that comes out as positive 80. There we go, so we have positive 80. So let's rewrite this then. So we have negative 6 plus and minus the square root of 80 all over 2. And again, we need to simplify that root 80. So let's have a look at simplifying that. Now the square root of 80, let's have a look up here. There's a couple of options here because 4 goes in again. Not a very nice one actually, because 60 actually does divide by 16 again, it goes in 5 times. So it's actually going to be 16 again for this one. You just got to watch out with some of these surds because you might have done 4 times 20, but hopefully you just spotted that 20 also divides by 4, which gives you another hint that it's going to be 16. But that's going to be root 16 multiplied by root 5, which is 4 root 5. There we go. So we can rewrite that root 80 as 4 root 5. So let's bring this up and finish it off. So we have negative 6 plus and minus 4 root 5, and that is all over 2. And again, we'll take the same approach. We'll divide this 6 by 2 and the 4 by 2, and that's going to leave us with negative 3 plus and minus 2 root 5. And there is our final answer with our final question. Negative 3 plus and minus 2 root 5. And that obviously just gives you a little bit of a showing of how you can actually use the quadratic formula without a calculator, but obviously we would leave our answer in this surd form. There is another unique scenario in which case the number under the square root could actually be a square number, in which case you could actually get some whole numbers out of this as well. But obviously that would indicate to you that you could have actually factorised, and there would have actually been some whole number solutions within the brackets. So it tends to be that we'd only use this process really if it doesn't factorise, and obviously writing our answer in surd form. But there we go, there's some work on the quadratic formula. Don't forget to check out the rest of the series on algebra here, and obviously looking at forming and solving quadratics by factorising, and all those sort of other elements of quadratics that are within that series. But hopefully you found that useful and helpful. If you did, please like, please comment, please subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.